And welcome, Michele.
Hi, Dale.
How are you? I'm going incognito today after this week. You're brave. You're
Well,
brave.
I get to put makeup on, and trust me,
Oh.
you love makeup.
So so history made this week. Um, I'm curious, Michelle's one of the best inter and intra-market analysts that I know. So I wanted your opinion of how the puzzle is fitting together. Why don't we start with the modern family, everyone getting along?
I'm so glad you started with that because I was thinking while I was listening to you guys, what is my foundation and what do I do best? And what is the simplest message that I can give to people who are tuned in today? And I definitely believe that it's the economic modern family right now. And it's so interesting. So I'd like to I would actually recommend that people write down some of these levels because they're so important and it's really going to dictate my next big trading moves. So we'll start with granny retail because I think that regardless of everything that we've seen, obviously Nvidia could never do any wrong, and growth stocks have been on a tear, with Tesla and
Yeah.
Amazon and Apple. To me, what's really going to define what happens next year, and even as we end this year, because obviously seasonalities are in the favor of the consumer typically, as we
Yeah.
get closer to the holidays, we have to look at XRT. And people have said to me, what about consumer discretionary? What about this? I like XRT as grandma because it's that blend of staples and discretionary. And what's incredible is if you take a weekly chart and you go back 10 months, really since February, it has not had a close above 80, or it's had intraday spikes to 80, but it hasn't actually been able to close up there. So to me, without too much thought, if you just really believe in massive consolidation breakouts, then you have to, in my opinion, follow a weekly close over 80 in XRT. Could happen today. Now, would I be a buyer at the end of the day on a Friday? Probably not after an election and Fed meeting and
Okay.
everything. But it would certainly be the first thing I would be looking at on Monday. So keep that in
Okay.
mind, that 80 level. If we
That
move
would reinforce a good holiday season. There are a lot of people, more than half the country, that are very happy about the result. The business community, we know that Trump is going to be more business friendly. There's not going to be any taxes on unrealized capital gains, which would have been kind of crazy. So maybe that's going to be the leadership. People are writing off the consumer again before the holidays, and I think people are going to spend till they drop.
Well, you make a great point because, yeah, ultimately, and this has happened throughout the history of the United States, when people go to vote, well, even though they may be upset about certain social liberties or other types of
Yeah,
type agendas, ultimately people vote with their wallets. And
yeah,
that's what happened this week is people believe that Trump can do better in terms of controlling inflation and bringing things back to the United States, lowering taxes and protecting the consumer. So that's exactly why
yeah,
it's so important to watch this XRT because that's going to tell you whether or not the belief in Trump is real, and then for how long it lasts, because you'll have a nice launching pad off of that 79.80 level that has to maintain. So that's kind of really where my biggest eyes are. But let's move around the board quicker than this because I want to get to other things. Obviously, people love to talk to me about commodities as well. But the small
yeah.
cap,
We'll talk beans, Michele.
we'll talk beans. Yes, the small cap. You saw my article from last night. The small
I
caps,
saw the chart.
right? IWM,
Yeah,
another
yeah,
very important grandpa, right? If
yeah,
retail is granny, then and this again is going to be a great representation of how much the market believes that will be able to bring manufacturing and industrial production into the U.S. These
yeah,
companies produce in the U.S. and also how much interest rates are going to affect both areas, by the way, retail and small caps. So what's interesting is with the Fed cut yesterday, we're not really seeing it yet in the Russells. Of course, the day hasn't started yet. But this close would be a really good close if we close up here over this 230 level, which it looks like that's obvious, but we haven't gotten to those new all-time highs that we had in 2021. So you gotta still have to look out at like what, 243, 244. I'm really super interested in the biotech space. I haven't done a thing there yet, but I love the chart. It's been bouncing between 140 and 150 also for quite some time. And I think if we can get a weekly close over 149, 150, and forget about all the talk about anti-vax and all this other stuff, there's other areas in biotech that are important.
Yeah.
In IBB or XBI, depending on, I'm looking at IBB. So keep your eye there. If we go to semiconductors, again, now a big political topic with China and exports and the CHIP Act, which now they're saying they're keeping. Who knows? But what I could tell you right now from the chart is 260 was a big number in SMH. We're through it. If we can get a weekly close above it, then my guess would be we'll see 280 in semiconductors pretty soon. Transportation's been interesting. That also
They've been lagging though, Michele. What do you make out of the almost everything else has made new highs, and the semis led all last year. Okay, is there any kind of market tell, even though Nvidia has made new highs, that the semis are still well off their highs?
Well, I think that part of the reason has been obviously there's been a lot of, stuff coming out of China and problems there. And I think a lot of the companies are trying to transition. If you look at Intel, for example,
Yeah,
right now it's still very much a bottom play. A lot of people think it's the generational opportunity, and it may be. I still think it needs to get through 30. But that's kind of what's happened in a lot of the, super micro. I mean, there's been
yeah,
some real issues in that space with
right,
guidance going forward. And it got
right.
so elevated, this is the nature of cycles, right? That's why so many people are talking about the great rotation into some of these other areas out of growth a little bit. That would make sense. I don't think you have to necessarily overthink. You just have to understand that this is the nature of life, is cycles. And that's
Yes,
why I'm so keen on the first three I talked about, maybe a little less keen right now in the semiconductor space. Um,
right. Okay.
Transportation is another one, the old Dow theory, right? Here we go.
Yeah.
Transportation's done pretty good. So unless it really breaks back down under, let's say, IYT 70, I think that's another interesting area. Again, would support a Trump policy of goods in the United States. And then finally, we have to look at the regional banks. And that's been really fascinating to me because there's the classic example. As it got through 50, it's up at 65 or ish right now.
Yeah. The fun.
65
Yeah.
is where it was in March, April of 2023.
SVB.
Yeah, right before it had the huge crash down.
Right.
So
Right.
now what we've done is we've rallied back to where the crash started. So
Right.
that's another interesting area to be looking at with the regional banks. So that's kind of how I'm looking at the family right now.
Okay. I know it's not in the family, but uh, I started paying attention to things like home builders, and Airbnb put out earnings yesterday. And I think that there's issues with the housing market. Uh, uh, I think that's something that has really propelled confidence and consumer spending and everything. And it's people's largest asset usually,
Mm-hmm.
and they have properties, rental properties. I think that it'd be ironic that a developer as president is going to reside over potentially the another housing crisis like we had in '08.
And yes, now I'm not necessarily worried about an '08 crisis because don't forget what happened in '08 was they were giving mortgages to just about
Yeah,
anyone, completely stated income, right? So you could say that you were, working as a house cleaner, but you were
yeah,
making $250,000 a year.
Yeah,
And they,
liar loans.
right, exactly.
Yeah,
And you had the whole subprime debacle, which really started it. We're not at that point right now. It's just a whole lot harder to get a loan right now with these levels of interest rates. And
great point.
yeah, and we have seen housing prices actually go way up over the last several years. So you have a kind of a, two-pronged strike against first-time home buyers, higher prices,
Yeah,
higher rates. So what could happen there is there's a lot of people on the sidelines are waiting for some kind of drop in the mortgage rates to possibly get in. So it may wind up correcting itself, looking at it optimistically, if we actually can see a reduction in the rates. And that's why there's so much conversation, I think, here between Trump and Powell. And will he keep Powell? Well, he can't just fire him without cause, but nonetheless, it's Trump, that can mean anything. And I keep reminding people that he appointed Powell, so he likes Powell. So I just want to divert here because I think what he said yesterday, people focused on so many other things, but only a couple of people focused on this. He mentioned, somebody asked him about stagflation, because this is
okay.
going to be a nice segue for us getting into commodities. With stagflation, he said, well, the way we're going to prevent stagflation is not letting it happen. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting answer. So how do you not let that happen? Well, stagnation would mean that he would stimulate the economy so that, let's go back to housing and the consumer, rates
Yeah,
go down, stimulates buying of goods and also houses. That's one way. The other way is that he would try to control inflation. Well, right now he's pretty convinced that inflation is
yeah, mission accomplished.
mission accomplished, right? So my guess, if I had to make a guess, is that he's going to be more dovish than not. And that would be, I think, a plus maybe for some of the surplus in housing and get some people out there to buy. People, I heard Blake say this before, and it's so true. Anybody who has an interest rate on their home under 3.5%
Yeah,
is not
uh,
so keen to sell their house right
and
now
pay 7
and pay
at a
7.
higher price. Yeah,
Right. The only way they would do that is if they could get so much money on their
they
house.
pay cash or something.
Exactly. Exactly. So anyway, so that's kind of I'm not that worried about the housing. I wouldn't use the word crash. I think if we're going to have a crash, it's going to come from other places, but not necessarily from the housing market.
Okay, valid. So, one of the most under-owned groups in commodities, because they've been on the Bataan Death March since Ukraine, right? Since the invasion, is
Yeah.
grains, and the beans have been the week of the week. Wheat has held up better, corn has held up better. All of a sudden, in the last week or so, especially yesterday, got a great looking candle. And it's interesting to me is I don't think that this can be affected by tariffs.
No.
We're not going to, well, he's not going to put tariffs to hurt the farmers on China. And China has not been buying beans from us, but they came back in because they see the advantage. So that's something that having China being the buyer in beans is a pretty good sign that they're coming back to our market. And if we get a weaker dollar, that's going to even make it more attractive. Uh, and the yuan's looking like it wants to come back. So go ahead, tell us about food. And this is, like reliving the 70s and beans in the teens. We already have that one. So you have anything that rhymes with 20, Michele?
All
Even though
right.
there's no one at the board to chant it anymore. Uh,
Well, I can't just
okay.
talk about beans isolated without, first of all, mentioning in terms of China, cotton is another huge import into China from the
Yeah,
United States. We're big cotton producers here. So you
right.
keep your eyes on the cotton chart. That also looks like it might be bottoming. If you just take a look at,
Okay.
I'm not suggesting we trade it, but from information standpoint, I think the cotton chart is interesting to watch as a sign of how much China is going to be buying from us. But let's go back to beans. But before we talk about beans, let's also talk about
Sugar?
Yes. Oh my God.
All right. Yeah.
You're in my mind, right?
All right. All right.
Well, the reason why we have to talk about sugar is because it's my trifecta, one of my trifectors. And my trifector's been struggling this year, right? Because
Yeah.
silver gold ratio has flipped all over the place, although I still am very,
Hasn't it?
yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
still much more at this point bullish in silver than I am in gold for a lot of
Yeah.
reasons, which I don't have time to
Yeah.
really get into. But we're not
Yeah.
really at a point that we can say, oh, inflationary. The dollar, which, we don't need to talk about that because I think you exhausted the topic there before and you've said everything that I would have thought, but the dollar is still strong. That's another. And sugar as my third because it represents a lot of things: geopolitics, weather,
Yeah.
tariffs, deglobalization, all of that, social unrest. I mean, it's like the perfect thing because it's in everything. It's a staple, and you cannot basically buy food off the shelf without sugar being in it. So
Right.
sugar right now, if you look at the chart, and it's in my daily yesterday, if you haven't seen it, that bullish pennant that's been forming on the sugar chart is a little bit frightening if it reconciles up. It broke out actually last week and then came back down. Okay, fine. But if it gets back through 2250, if you're looking at the March contract, that was the chart I think I posted yesterday. That's telling me about food in general. So that brings me back to beans. The reason why I was looking at the beans chart is because the beans have a lot of the same risk in terms of geopolitics and weather that sugar does, and also basically a staple, particularly as you're going out to Southeast Asia and China, right?
Yes. Tofu.
So yeah, tofu, right? And so the bean chart is very interesting. Here we have quadruple bottoms.
Yeah.
Um, and if we can, yesterday it broke out over the 50-day moving average in the futures charts. And so if we start to see it move up, it hasn't quite taken out the resistance yet. And there will be resistance all along the way, but that doesn't matter to me. What matters is this giant base it's been forming over the last few months. And if it continues to go higher from here, like get through, really basically 106, 110, whatever, if you're looking at that contract, that to me means another sign. And in general, I believe that food is the thing that we have to keep our eyes on for next year. Not only as a potential investment, as I mentioned with sugar and beans, DBA could be something to be looked at as well because it covers a whole gamut. But
And it did it with the whole market selling off. Okay. A strong dollar took metals down, but the beans actually on their own. I always look for days like that where you have a red day across similar groups. What's
Mhm.
green? There's a market message in that it
Right.
could be green.
I think it's off a little bit here this morning. I haven't looked in about a half an hour, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, that doesn't matter. I mean, by the way, my little very casual, unproven, but yet observation is never sell commodities on a Friday if they're weak. I don't know. For some reason, that
Uh,
just seems like on Friday there's profit taking, and it's a trap if you think the move is over. So just
oh gosh, what the floor trader never leaves you.
exactly. How
All
could it?
right.
It's been my friend. But anyway, so my advice to everybody is watch The Modern Family for the macro. That's going to really be a great guide. Again, considering the country thinks that Trump's going to fix the US economy to the point where it's going to see major growth without inflation. That is going to tell you in the charts. This is where the charts are super comforting. And then in terms of commodities, yeah, watch the silver. If it gets back through 3250, I think that's a good sign. I don't even really necessarily care what gold does as much, more about silver and the relationship to gold. The dollar, I just looked at the euro dollar chart before I came on, by the way, and the euro looks terrible. But
Okay.
the dollar yen, is kind of like, oh, okay, if it breaks down under 149, that's probably weak for the dollar. If it gets through 156, not a great sign for the yen. What that does, I'm not really sure. The yen carry trade was something that people got all hysterical about a month ago. But still, regardless of all of that, keep your eye on food, basic food commodities, because even if we end the war in Ukraine or what have you, I still feel that that could be the secret inflationary sauce that nobody can control. Because as far as I know, we can't artificially produce food enough to feed the entire world, number one.
Yeah, Fed can't print corn.
Exactly. And the Fed can't raise interest rates enough to a point.
They
Oh,
did it though. They did it. I remember in 1980, the Fed, Volcker was watching corn prices,
yeah,
and
but
he
look
kept
where he had to
tightening.
go. Yeah, do you
That's
think, but
what he had to do to break the corn market.
right, and do you think under Trump's watch that would happen
No,
right away? No, of
no,
course.
we'll be negative 5% interest rates. We'll go back to negative rates.
Yeah, well, maybe not, but at least maybe that 3.5 percent Fed funds rate, but that's really what I think is being targeted right now.
Yeah, yeah.
And I have to believe that Trump is reasonable enough and in communication with Powell, again, the guy he chose, to think that's probably more realistic and healthy as well.
Okay. What I want to do is I want people to be able to find you and the great work you do. And here it is. Here's Michele's website, MarketGauge. You could find her on X at Market Minute, but she does a lot of great work. And Michele is right. I get her free update. They, I was looking at beans, and then I got this thing for Michele, and I read them, and there she is talking about beans. So when someone whose work I respect starts to talk about something that I was already, paying attention to, it's like a confirmation to me, Michele.
I thank you, Dale, and I feel the same way about you. I love when we're in the same on the same page.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you and I think very similarly. Even if we don't always agree, that doesn't matter. What does matter is when we do agree. So if we're watching beans together, let's go beans.
Okay. I think that you're onto something, and there are ETFs. Have you ever tried any of the ETFs on the grains,
Well,
or
the
they're a
SOYB,
problem?
well,
Huh?
yeah, there were a problem with K1s. A lot of people can't trade them.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but SOYB would be the one tied to soybeans.
yeah.
There's all these issues with it. I mean, but I know a lot of people don't want to trade futures. But DBA had an unbelievable move. I mean, consider
Okay,
about a year
DBA.
ago, people were talking to me about DBA. Oh, why do you think DBA is going up? At that point, it was only trading at like 20. It's gotten up over 26. It's sitting around 25. To me, that's not bearish.
Yeah,
That's laying in wait.
yeah. Any ag plays and stocks
Well,
that would?
yeah, I've been, that's why I'm so modern family conscious right now. Two things I really believe for next year. I still believe in the thin trade. I do
Oh
believe
yeah,
that the diet drugs, love them or hate them, doesn't matter. I think people would say, I rather be thin than, and have any kind of risks from the drugs than be fat, which we know the risks are. And then that would create a situation where people might be looking at certain stocks that will make them better in their appearance now for the first time as they feel better about themselves. So that would be, skincare and beauty, maybe
yeah.
fashion, maybe athletic wear, sneakers. These are the kinds of things for 2025 that I've been sort of looking at.
Okay.
Um, I still think, with the Tesla move, I think that the whole solar energy space and some of the American-made EV companies are so undervalued. I wouldn't necessarily be buying the Chinese EV companies, even though, China's going to do its own thing. But if we're looking at American economy, yeah, look at that. Look at some of some of the anything that has to do with industrial production increase. Symbotic is a company that's starting to look very interesting. They do automation
Mhm.
for warehousing. Walmart uses them. So
Okay.
start thinking reshoring, but also think inflation, think about the basic raw materials that are needed to produce all these things that people are saying are going to be produced in this.
Yeah, a lot of them are in China, so we have to be careful about poking them in the eye too
Yeah,
much because
yeah,
well, I know we're reshoring, but all the production is still there.
absolutely. And Vietnam, which,
Yeah.
right now has probably been one of my, well, there's two trades that have been my most frustrating. Believe it or not, one of my better trades besides Bitcoin, blockchain, and all of that, because that was, regardless of whether Trump was winning with the halving, it was almost right on schedule. every time we've had a halving every 4 years, it's October when Bitcoin
Yeah.
starts to take off. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what happened. And then, of course, the election, everybody said, oh, yeah, it's because
Yeah.
of Trump. But I think it was going to happen regardless of who
Yeah. It
won.
was a cup and handle or a bull flag or
Exactly.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Any view on Apple before we say goodbye with the China thing coming up again?
you know, I have not touched Apple for a really long time. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
It's not
really,
attractive.
I know
It's
people
a
love,
bond. Is it
it's a
like a bond?
bond. Yeah, if you bought Apple like and just sat with it for the rest of your life, that's one thing. But if you were looking to invest, that's probably to me not where I would go right now. Like I said,
Okay.
really keep your eye on that retail space, that granny
Okay.
retail
Good.
10-month consolidation. You want to make some money, or at least I'm
Yeah.
hoping if you want to make some money, that is going to be the place that shows if the optimism that everybody came to on November 5th for a Trump
Yeah.
presidency is going to be real or not. That and the interest rates, of course. That will tell you everything right there.
Another great interview with great content from Michele Schneider
Thank
at
you so much.
Market Minute, and you guys can watch it again. Always check on what Michele is thinking. Keep an open mind. It'll keep your account open. Right? Don't you think?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know,
TGIF too. Man, I am tired.
yeah.
I'm sure
Uh,
you're tired too. Well, you didn't
all
show your.
right. Yeah, that's how tired. See how I look? That's pretty tired. I'm just a black box right now. So anyway, Michele, great being able to talk to you again, and uh, have a great fourth quarter, you and your team and all your subscribers. I hope they, just uh, reap all the guilt by Hanukkah. All right.
Thank you. And by the way, I just want to say thank you to Stelios and Blake too, because you guys post my stuff every day, and I really
Yeah.
appreciate
Yeah. They helped me recover my Twitter account.
that.
I
Ah,
lost it. These people have hearts.
oh, yeah, no, they're
Yeah,
wonderful guys,
they
both
do.
of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so
So,
are you, Dale. So thank you.
oh, thanks, Michele. Nice talking to you. Michele Schneider, everybody. People are thanking you. Saloom says great interview. So you have fans here. Thank you, Michele.
Ciao, guys. Good luck.
All right. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So that's a wrap, everyone. I'm exhausted, like Michele said. Have a great weekend, recharge, and we'll do it again next week. And don't just count your pips, count your blessings. Adios, everyone. See ya. Thanks again, Michele.
Hey traders, this is Blake Morrow with ForexAnalytix. Thanks for stopping by our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like these videos, share them, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of the content that we provide here for free. Thanks for stopping by. I'll see you in the next video.